Hello, amazing people. Welcome back to the Ryan Files. I'm your host, Ryan Pelton, and tonight we're stepping once again into the mystery, the controversy, and the brilliance surrounding one of the greatest minds to ever walk this earth, Nikola Tesla. If you caught our last episode with Tim R. Swartz, you already know how deep this rabbit hole goes. That conversation struck a nerve, and for good reason. But what we're unpacking today goes even further. Because Tesla wasn't just the wizard of lightning, he was a visionary whose work shook the very foundations of the power structure, literally and figuratively. This is the man whose dreams of free energy and wireless transmissions threatened the wealthiest men on the planet. The man who outthought Edison. The man whose designs may still sit locked away in government vaults to this day. But how much of what we know about Tesla is fact and how much it has been erased, twisted, or even buried beneath layers of corporate greed and national security? Tonight, Tim R. Swartz returns to the Ryan Files to help us break it down. Tim has spent years researching Tesla's life, his work, and the mysteries that continue to swirl around his untimely death, including what may have really happened to those missing documents and why the military was so eager to swoop in. Was Tesla truly decades or even a century ahead of his time? Did he tap into something the powers that be never wanted the world to understand? Get ready, because the answers might challenge everything you think you know about history, technology, and control. This is the Ryan Files. Folks, thank you so much for joining me this week on the Ryan Files. We're bringing him back, Tim R. Swartz. Thank you so much for coming back on the Ryan Files. Last time we talked about mimics, and this week we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, something you wrote about, the one and only Nikola Tesla. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me back on, Ryan. I had a great time the first time I was on your show, so I was more than happy that you asked me to come back a second time.
Yeah, well, and we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, and I think probably, from what I understand, one of yours as well, Nikola Tesla.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, here we have this guy born, in the mid 1800s. And, just in Croatia, modern day Croatia, it went through a lot of different things. I don't know where the story starts for you, but I mean, there's nothing about Nikola Tesla that isn't fascinating. Go ahead and just start us out. Give us, the 101, and we can get into the deep stuff later on, but the 101 of Nikola Tesla.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you said, Tesla was born in what is today Croatia. At that point, it was part of like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This would have been, 1856.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely a unusual political situation going on in Europe at that time.
Right.
Now, according to the legend, Tesla was born in the middle of like a severe thunderstorm, possibly the most, the worst storm that the area had ever seen. Who knows if that's true or not? It sounds good, considering Nikola Tesla's later legacy as the man of lightning. So it sounds good that he was born in the middle of a thunderstorm. So who am I to say whether or not that's actually true or not? But it's, like I said, it's a good mythology.
Yeah.
And right from the beginning, according to his family, Tesla showed an aptitude towards inventions and mathematics, and just being able to come up with ways to solve problems quickly and easily. Now his father always said that Tesla got his intelligence from his mother's side of the family, because apparently his mother was also like a whiz at coming up with little inventions to help her with her household chores, things like that. So obviously that spark of genius runs deep in Tesla's genetics. But his father was an Orthodox minister, an Orthodox priest, and really wanted Tesla to become a priest as well. But Tesla had other ideas, and in fact, Tesla, when he was a teenager, he came down with oh, I can't remember what it is now.
Was it was
I
it
want to say
was it
I
smallpox? Or
yeah, I don't think it was small. I don't think it was smallpox, but it was something that was life threatening, in that time. And his father promised him that if he survived, that he would allow Tesla to go to university rather than to go into ministry. So I think that served as a purpose for Tesla to survive this, so he could do what he wanted to do, and that would be to continue his education. And for us, it's a good thing that he did,
yeah, absolutely.
because yeah, well, face it. I mean, we would not be here enjoying the electronics and electricity and all the things that we take for granted for our modern technological society if it hadn't been for Nikola Tesla.
And
We probably,
the
yeah,
obstacles along
well,
the way too are fascinating.
oh, yes, yes, definitely. Well, I just wanted to say that, I mean, somebody eventually would have discovered the things that Tesla did, but it probably would have come a lot later. Because you have to remember that, in Tesla's heyday, this was the late 19th, early 20th century. So, I mean, that really did give our technological society a really, big jump start, as opposed to if we didn't have a genius like Tesla coming up with the things that he did, and like you said, yeah, I mean, Tesla did have his obstacles. Face it, when you have a mind like Tesla, and Tesla probably um, had characteristics that would have maybe put him on the spectrum, as
Yeah.
they would, as they would say. He definitely later in life developed things like, obsessive compulsive, behavior and things like that. This was stuff that was probably a predominant part of his personality all of his life. But then again, these were the type of attributes that probably led him to be the genius that he was.
Right.
I mean, there has not been a lot of people on this planet that has even come close to the type of genius that Tesla was.
Yeah.
Um, after he went to university and he got jobs in Europe for various telephone at the time was just starting to come out and to be developed. So he was working for telephone companies in places like Prague, like that, when he had the chance to immigrate to the United States, and which was something that he really was wanting to do. One reason was because he had made it a challenge to himself when he was just a kid. When he was a kid, he had a picture of Niagara Falls. Actually, it was probably a wood carving. I don't know. It may have been an actual photograph, but it was drawing, painting, whatever. It was a picture of Niagara Falls. And Tesla said that he would imagine the energy from all of that water flowing over that cliff. And he thought there's got to be a way to harness that power. And I'm going to be the guy who does it. And
Just
that
typical, mindset of a
yeah,
young kid,
sure, yeah.
That's pretty,
But that's the type of mind that
yeah,
Tesla had.
yeah.
I mean, he was a dreamer, but he also had the ability to make those dreams come true. You know,
Right.
there are a lot of people who are dreamers that never have the ability other than just being a dreamer. Tesla, he was able to make it work. He was able to make the things that he was thinking of, conceiving in his mind. Sometimes they would just pop into his mind when he was working on something else.
Yeah.
That's the kind of guy Tesla was. So
Yeah.
yeah, when he had the chance to immigrate to the United States, he saw that, oh, well, that's a sign, that's going to get me even closer to Niagara Falls and to realize my dream of harnessing that power.
Right. So as we step back, that is during the later 1800s when
Mhm.
that happens. We're in the Industrial Revolution, so to speak, and coming into America at that time is significant because there was so much going on at that time. It was like almost the perfect storm and the perfect time for someone like Nikola Tesla to come to America, of all places, where the money was there to kind of back him, and the ingenuity was there, the desire, the ability to dream it and make it a reality. All of that kind of lent itself, I feel like, to for lack of a better word, aiding and abetting the brilliant scientist that he was, the brilliant mind, but not necessarily the business kind of man. I don't think that there was a lot of I want to get rich in Nikola Tesla. I think he loved the science. I think that some of his competitors were different in that they enjoyed the science, but they also wanted to make the money and have the power and control. And so you find yourself a brilliant human being who might open himself to be taken advantage of when it comes to business, right?
When Tesla first came to the United States, one of the other reasons that he wanted to come here was the chance to work with Thomas Edison. And, because at that time, Edison was a big name, you know, and Edison was also working on developing DC current for consumer use. And this was something that Tesla was interested in as well, though he had other ideas on a system that would be even better than DC. And he was positive that Thomas Edison would be interested in hearing about this new system that would be even better than the DC system that Edison was currently trying to push on the United States. So when Tesla showed up at Edison's office, he had several letters of recommendations from the various presidents and CEOs of the companies that he worked with in Europe. And Edison wasn't too sure at first because Tesla was how would you put this? He was like a courtly type of person, very European, very dapper, dressed well, spoke well, knew several languages, was young and enthusiastic. And Edison, he wasn't sure, but because of these letters of recommendations, he hired Tesla to work for him, giving him, various tasks. At the time, Thomas Edison was testing his DC current system in some neighborhoods in Manhattan. He was wiring them up for household electricity. The problem with DC current, though, is that, and I'm not an electrician, so I'm just going to, explain it as simply as I can. DC is not powerful enough to travel very far down the wires. So about every mile or so, you would have to have like a substation to kick the current back up again to send it on to the next block. But that's expensive. A substation every mile or so. Um, and so uh, at one point, Edison assigned Tesla a task with rewiring, and I think it was a private ship of a friend of Edison's who had a lot of money and had this private, I want to say yacht, but I think it was even bigger than a yacht, that had its own self-contained DC power plant in it that had kept shorting out, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with it. So he told Tesla, get this fixed in a certain amount of time, and I'll give you a raise of, $50,000, something like that. So, Tesla was like, all right, and went and figured out the problem in a matter of a couple of hours, something that had been stumping Edison's engineers for a couple of weeks. And Tesla got it figured out and fixed in a day's time. So he comes back to Edison and is like, okay, all fixed. Where's my bonus? And Edison basically just kind of brushed him off and told him that he didn't understand the American sense of humor.
Hmm.
And so Tesla was like, that's it, and he quit. So I mean, he worked for Edison less than a month. Before this happened, and he quit. And for a while, he was like digging ditches, Tesla, in order to try to make things meet,
Yeah, just
to
to make
make
it.
any
Yeah,
kind of money. Right, right. But his reputation of being a good engineer and good knowledge of the then upcoming science of electricity led him to be able to get some meetings with other industrialists.
right.
And when Tesla was still living in Europe, he had been wanting to perfect AC current, all
Hmm.
right, to produce an AC motor. There had been others who had attempted this, I guess, over the years and were not successful. And in fact, one of Tesla's professors in university told him that an AC motor would be impossible because it would be akin to perpetual motion. Now, I haven't quite figured out, just exactly why he would think that an AC motor would be like perpetual motion. But you have to remember that this is around the same time also that people thought that trains couldn't go any faster than, say, like 60 miles an hour or something like that, or else you would turn inside out if you were a passenger on board, or that bumblebees couldn't fly, that they, technically were too heavy to be able to fly. So Tesla had this idea stewing around the back of his head, and he said that one late afternoon, he and a friend were taking a walk in the park, and Tesla said that all of a sudden, he wasn't even thinking about the AC motor. He said that all of a sudden he had this vision where he could see the AC motor that he had been working on in front of him. And he said that it looked like a real 3D object. Now we would call it like maybe a hologram. But this was a vision that only he could see. His friend couldn't see this. But he said that with his mind, he could turn this AC motor around every direction. He could take it apart. He could see all the components, and he could see all of the parts that had been giving him problems that he couldn't figure out. It was like this eureka moment with a vision.
Right.
And in fact, he was so taken aback that he had to stop, and then he took a stick and actually drew a diagram in the dirt of this because he was afraid the vision would disappear and then he'd forget about it. Luckily for us, he didn't.
Right.
The vision did eventually disappear, but he knew from that point on how to build that. All right. So when he was in the United States, after he stopped working for Edison, he was going around trying to get investors interested in helping him produce this AC motor. And with the AC motor would come all kinds of wonderful things.
Right. So here we are. Okay, first of all, let's break this down. You have a guy who's getting knowledge, input, I mean, visual, and whatnot from somewhere. You know, he calls it a vision, but you know, there's a lot of different explanations for what that could be. And maybe it is just as simple as just a, you know, subconscious vision, of he's thought about it and dreamed about it so much that his mind worked it out and showed him. It could be that, but there's also other explanations about things like that. And there's documentation all over of these people, sometimes almost like they're getting a download of information from somewhere. But what's as fascinating it is, though, that he figures this out in the vision and whatnot, and writes it down in the dirt and everything else. The fascinating part is that he is deciding to go up against his old employer, who is trying to get DC going. And it's, you know, it's obviously DC current for what we wanted to use it for is inferior to AC current. The DC does have its positive sides, no doubt about it. But not whenever it comes to lighting houses and blocks and cities and all that stuff. So all of a sudden, that's the conundrum, right? He's going to battle.
Oh yes, yeah, exactly. And the ironic thing about it is that if Edison hadn't been the type of person that he was, he could have easily have brought Tesla into the fold, helped him develop the AC current, and it would have been Edison then who got rich, you know, off of and who knows, you know, I mean, Edison being the type of person that he was, he, after the success, he may have just cast Tesla aside and, like, you know, like claiming he invented the light bulb and the movie camera and the phonograph all by himself when he had teams of engineers that were doing the work for him. You know, he was just the smart businessman.
Exactly.
And when, you know, like the movie camera and movie projector, there were people in France you know, producing movies already when Edison, you know, stepped into it and said that he, you know, no, here, I invented the movie projector and camera. So that's the kind of guy that Edison was, and unfortunately was a foe of Tesla's for the rest of both their lives.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, I do want to bring up something real quick about Tesla's visions, because this was something that then occurred to him at various times throughout his life.
Right.
You know, where he would have these visions about usually his inventions and how to get around problems that were vexing him. But see, one of the other things is that apparently he was these ideas and inventions and things like that were just constantly coming out of him. And later in life, because he didn't really like writing too much. I mean, he usually would have an assistant then who he would dictate to that would write down this stuff. But it was interesting because I was reading a biography about oh gosh, I hate that when that happened. Now his name has slipped me. Um, oh God, I just hate that. Let's party like it's 1999. You know who I'm talking about.
Like Prince.
Prince, thank you.
We're
I
talking
hate
about
that. It's
Tesla and
just
it's Prince. Okay, here we
it's
go.
Prince. Well, okay, it's biography about Prince. All right, now you'll see where I'm going with this. The person who wrote this biography traveled a lot with Prince, and Prince was constantly writing music down. And when they were on a flight coming back from Los Angeles, Prince wrote an entire album, one of his more famous albums, in fact, on this flight, because the music was constantly coming out of him, and he had to write it down, or else he'd forget it. And he was a savant when it came to music, and I think that's the way it was with Tesla. He was a savant when it came to science and inventions. This stuff was just it was like he had. It's like these people have an open access to the Akashic record, but honed in on various frequencies of information. And I mean, and that's not to say that these people aren't geniuses in their own right, but I think when it comes to these really true super geniuses, that there could be a little bit more at play here, that they just have that right kind of mind or brain to be able to tap into a universal a source of knowledge. And for a lot of people, you would think, oh wow, that would be great. But for people like Prince and Tesla, they were able to make a success of it, but it can also be rather debilitating. Okay, because it can be hard to rest and take a break because your mind is constantly working on this stuff. Tesla would only sleep just a few hours a night. He was one of these people who said that, who thought that everybody should be like that, that, that if we trained ourselves, you would only have to sleep a couple of hours a night. And I think with Tesla, his mind was just, since he was a kid, was constantly working on overdrive, that it was hard to sleep. It was hard to concentrate on anything else except his work. That was the most important thing for him. And money that came into him was almost always siphoned to work. All right. That's, he was interested in making money, but only if he could apply it to his work. Even though he lived very well in his heydays, he wasn't a materialistic type of guy. I mean, he wasn't the person that, he would save up, billions and billions and billions of dollars for really no reason at all. No, Tesla put all of his money into his work, which later in life, some people say, led led to bad things happening. He was not a wealthy person when he passed away years
For
later.
sure. Yeah, for sure. Um, as we kind of go through this, I think would it wouldn't be appropriate unless we mentioned just some of the ridiculous battles that happened between Tesla and Edison when it comes to the power battles. And Edison taking and shocking a elephant with and killing an elephant in a demonstration of AC power and why you shouldn't back AC power. And I mean, just some crazy stuff, right? I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely, absolutely, right. Yeah, it was the Westinghouse company that saw Tesla's genius and agreed to help him build the first prototypes for the AC motor, which then eventually led to Tesla being able to build an electrical generator system at Niagara Falls, making his dream come true. He was able to do that. Um, but because of this development, Edison was seeing his investments for DC just go down the drain. And, I mean, and Edison's not the type of guy that is used to losing money.
right.
All right. So, being the type of person that he was, he started this campaign, like you said, to show how dangerous AC current was. You know, DC current's nice and friendly. Let it into your house. It won't harm your children or shock your grandma. But AC current, no, that's the killer. And like you said, they had this demonstration where they took this elephant, Topsy, I think is what its name was, who had freaked out and I guess had trampled its handlers to death. Two of them, killed two people. So with newsreel cameras now, and if you look this up, you can find this probably on YouTube. I've seen the film before. They wire this poor elephant up with AC current and then, shock it to death.
Yeah.
Not pleasant, not pleasant to watch at all. Edison then went and invented the first electric chair
Yeah.
using AC current. Again, to demonstrate how bad AC current is and why should you allow, something that could kill your daddy into your house. And the first, I gosh, I can't even remember what it was named. They actually, named this electric chair and demonstrated. I don't think they had this one on newsreel
Yeah, right.
of the prisoner that they electrocuted, but from what I've heard, it was not a fast death.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but that was the type of stuff that Edison would do. If you can't dissuade people that your invention, your product is better, well, then you have to make the other product look worse, dangerous even, and that's what he was trying to do. Um, with AC current, and fortunately, it didn't work. But it's a pretty shameful page in Edison's big book of history.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've met people like this in
Oh
business over
yeah,
the years that it's win at all costs.
yes,
It is win at all costs, and it doesn't matter if you have to do things that are not ethical. It is win at all costs, and if you're not good enough to win, then you got to destroy someone to walk on top of or whatever. But you can kind of almost feel this personality trait, that Edison had, and if you've ever met anyone like that, you understand the elevation of this battle, just how big of a deal it was. So,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, and the other thing is that in some ways, Edison did end up actually winning for a long time because I know that when I was in elementary school, we were taught that not only did Edison invent the light bulb, but he invented electricity as well. And there used to be a display at the Smithsonian Institute talking about Edison's progress and various inventions leading to the modern electrical grid system, with no mention of Tesla at all.
he was
And
the
it
Wizard of
wasn't.
Menlo Park.
Yeah, well, see, and that may have had a lot to do with it. Edison was an American, and even though, Tesla was an American at that point as well, he wasn't born in America. Edison was born in America, and that the way he handled business was definitely the American capitalist
Yeah.
method. Uh,
And in this time period too, we're talking about some major players, major money, JP Morgan, and just so much that get involved in this story. And I think that there was a time beyond just everything that happened with electricity, AC, DC, all that stuff, that Tesla had opportunities and financial backing on some things that he believed strongly in. And some of that stuff happened at the Wardenclyffe Tower, his quote unquote death ray, and wireless communication, all these different things. There's this another phase of his career. Just kind of unpack that moment, that time frame.
Well, after the success of the AC motor and the now growing development of the electrical grid system, the Westinghouse company was making a lot of money, and because Tesla had a number of patents based on all of this, he was making a lot of money as well. Um, at some point, for some reason, the Westinghouse company started having financial problems. And George Westinghouse came to Tesla and said, if we continue paying you the royalties for your patents on your inventions, the motors and all the things that we are using, we're going to go bankrupt. And Tesla said, because you were the only guy, you were the only ones who actually believed in me and financed me and helped me make my dream come true, I'm going to tear up my contract with you. So you don't have to pay me the royalties. However, stipulation is that future ventures, future things that I would like to do, I'll give you the first option, and I'll expect you to accept them.
Right.
And they shook, gentleman's agreement, shook hands on it, and that was it. Unfortunately, that would later come back and bite Tesla on the ass, because again, business. Now that Westinghouse was no longer in debt to Tesla, they could basically go off and do whatever they wanted to. And when Tesla would come to them and say, I've got some inventions, we'll talk about it. We'll see. And the relationship was never as good between the two after that point.
And once again, it's all
And
about business. It's all
it is.
business.
It's all about, and Tesla at this point had some really great ideas that he was pushing. The main thing that he was working on, and this was something that came about when he was building the generating plant at Niagara Falls. All right. After you generate the electricity, you then have to have wires to carry it out, to the various cities. And unfortunately, Westinghouse lost the bid to those wires, and the Edison Company won it. The Edison Company was the one who was going to produce the wires. And of course, they weren't going to produce them cheaply. Let me put it that way. There may have been some cost overruns for these wires. So Edison, throughout Tesla's life, was always there, kind of digging in a little bit.
Right.
But because of that, Tesla was like, okay, perhaps there is a way that we could generate electricity in one location and send it to the various places that need it without wires. How would I go about doing that? And that's where Tesla's ideas for the wireless distribution of electricity came about. And he actually went and built a new laboratory at Colorado Springs, Colorado, because of the thunderstorms that were there. Lots and lots of thunderstorms rolling across the plains, bumping up against the mountains there.
Right.
His initial idea was that perhaps I could harness lightning find a way to put it in a jar. That's what his initial thought was, and so he went out there to see if he could do that, and he found eventually that just too powerful, and static electricity as well. I mean, it's extremely difficult to try to harness that kind of electricity. But he had learned some other things, and figured out that um, there was an electromagnetic field associated with lightning, and that it's the same effect that you get. And there's probably a lot of our listeners who have never heard an AM radio in their life, but AM radio is very prone to interference from thunderstorms and the electricity produced. That's because of the electromagnetic waves across the various frequencies that can be picked up on AM. So if you're listening to a station and there's a storm nearby, you get this constant crackle of static caused by lightning strikes. So because of that, Tesla was like, well, perhaps there's a way then that I could use that, to send electricity to other locations safely.
Right.
And that really that was Tesla's, after Niagara Falls, this was Tesla's big dream. And he was certain that he figured it out, that he knew how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. But his backing, his financial backing kind of slipped away. It kind of got ended. And right at the moment, I guess, where he was wanting to demonstrate it and whatnot, his financial backing pulled out. Is that not correct? That's what I thought.
When Tesla came back from Colorado Springs, like I had said previously, he had it figured out. He was certain
Right.
that this was going to work on a much larger scale. He had got it to work on a smaller scale of I think about a 10-mile radius from his laboratory, which was at that time out in the sticks. Right now, it's a suburban neighborhood. I was there a couple of years ago, and I mean, it's just it's houses and suburban streets. But
Wow.
at that time, he was out in the middle of nowhere. And so he was able to get light bulbs to light miles away, uh, uh, because they were, first of all, they were grounded. And then they were set up to resonate at a frequency that was being sent by him from his laboratory. Uh, so he knew that he could probably scale this up into a much larger thing. So he went back to New York, going to the people that he had worked with before, and his main source that he was able to convince was J.P. Morgan.
Right.
And but Tesla had to fudge a little bit on his details. All right, he told J.P. Morgan that this test facility that he was going to build on Long Island, New York, was going to be like an international radio station. All right. And you have to remember, there's no radio yet at this point. Tesla probably was the only one on the planet who had radio receivers and radio transmitters. Okay. And that was to listen for lightning originally. So he convinced J.P. Morgan that this was going to be like a radio station, wireless telegraph, as they were calling it at the time. And not only could you send telegraph messages, but eventually voice messages, music. And Tesla even said, eventually we will be able to send images, television images, with this, not just with this one. I mean, we'll build them all over the world, these transmitters.
Right.
and neglecting to, and he left out the part where and will also be able to transmit electricity wirelessly
Right.
because he knew these people, rather narrow-minded, now you have to understand, would not be able to figure out how you could put a meter up and charge people for electricity that was being sent over the air.
Right. Yeah.
So Tesla left that part out. So with his money, not just from Morgan, but a couple other investors as well, he set to work to building this massive array on Long Island. It would look somewhat like a giant Tesla coil, except that it was encased with a brick. Yeah, well, that's like a small version of
Right.
it. The one that he had, it was a building shaped somewhat like a silo, broader at the base, and then it would narrow near the top. And then he had a big copper globe on top of it. This was a huge array.
And this was Morgan
And
Cliff Tower.
yes,
Yes.
right. Yeah, yeah. And he had like huge iron rods that extended for the entire length up into this copper ball and then deep, deep down into the ground. And this Tesla's idea was that you would be able to, as he put it, grab the earth, grab the earth by its balls, so to speak, and then using that resonance, that Schumann resonance, as it was called later, then be able to transmit electricity out on certain frequencies. And he had a couple of ideas on, like what frequency band. But again, this was an experiment in progress, a big experiment in progress. And he knew that if he came across any problems, he'd be able to fix it. Um, and got fairly close to completing this. Close enough that he was able to do some test runs on it and send out energy. And that was then picked up at other locations as far away, I think, as even Manhattan. And he was just using like a small coal-driven generator that he had at the location. He was going to build an even bigger one for when it fired up completely. So it was working. Unfortunately, news got back to J.P. Morgan that, and it was Tesla's big fear, that this was going to generate electricity, and how are you going to meter it? How are we going to make money off of it? Morgan withdrew his funding and then convinced Tesla's other benefactors to not only withdraw their money, but then to sue him for misconduct and like lying about the original purpose, things like that. And that basically that destroyed Tesla's reputation. And this was the early 1900s, 1905, I think. Don't quote me on that.
Right.
But like the early 1900s, and unfortunately, this was something that Tesla never was able to recover from.
Yeah. It was kind of like the beginning of the end because he was ostracized somewhat at that
Oh
point,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this was a situation also where Edison had to come in as well and kick Tesla in the ribs a couple of times, by saying that telling newspapers that Tesla had never really been an inventor. He was a con man. And that, anything that he did invent that he was successful with, it was just luck. He just stumbled into it. And that everything else that he ever did, it was just a way for him to, make money and to fleece his investors.
Which is
I
the
mean,
that's the typical MO. You're basically describing exactly what you do. and then putting it on someone else.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
but there's actually late 1800s evidence of he had a radio remote controlled basically boat.
Hmm.
Um, this is 18, I think 98, and he was can control a boat, so it's radio signals. Um, and so all of his talk about radio waves and communication and whatnot, um, I mean, it was legit. I mean, and I honestly think there was probably people back in that time that were like, hey, you know what? Hold up here because this sounds too fanciful. And, and I think there might have even been like a lack of imagination to realize it. And just like you said, if you can't realize it in your mind, if you, in your mind's eye, you're going to have a difficult time figuring out, well, how are we going to make money off of this? And I mean, that's what it always comes down to, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And you have to remember also at this time that this was a golden age for the emergence of new ideas and new technology.
Yeah.
So it even though it was like the equivalent of the development of the internet for us, the electricity and indoor lighting and all this. I mean, that was such a fantastic thing. And as you said, with this, Tesla got started working with radio and radio frequencies and things like that. I mean, Tesla really should be considered the true inventor of radio as we know it today. Even though I mean, there have been a lot of people throughout the years working on it to make it a dream, but everyone now says it was Marconi, except that Marconi used Tesla's patents in order to build his experimental radio equipment and then claimed, hey, I invented radio. Uh,
Yeah.
when, years before, and Tesla even had the patents,
Yeah.
to prove it. But for something like, okay, he demonstrated the radio control boat in, I think it was, Central Park there in New York. And people thought it was amazing and fantastic, but it was just a toy. Nobody else could see how this could be developed into other stuff.
Right.
All they could see was just, Tesla was able to make this, boat perform on command, and that's about it. And unfortunately, that's something that a lot of inventors and great thinkers run into in their times is that they'll have these fantastic, earth-shaking ideas that are never appreciated until usually long after they're dead.
Right.
That's kind of the way it is with Tesla.
Yeah,
Um,
isn't it though? I mean, I think as history goes on, like you said, and I was taught the same. I was taught the same growing up. Hey, Thomas Edison, man, Wizard of Menlo Park, had
that's
electricity
right.
and everything, light bulb, and he had it going on. Never heard of Nikola Tesla until after I was out of high school, believe it or
Hmm.
not.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the truth of the matter starts to come around on some of these things. And that's what's so interesting about Tesla, because how much of it is history? How much of it is hidden history? How much of it was made up by his, opponents? And it's hard to know exactly the picture of this man. And he was kind of an enigma in so many ways too. It's hard to really get. That's why I find him so fascinating. And some of the pictures that you'll see of him, sitting there with this electricity going all around him, and just the fact that he would walk like 8 to 10 miles a day, sleep 2 hours a night, and then he had to he did everything in threes, and he had to walk around his building 3 times before he'd go inside of it, just weird stuff. And he made some comments too, like later on in his career, that was fascinating. And then there's talk about the death ray that, if I'm not mistaken, either Wardenclyffe Tower or the one in Colorado that you were talking about, there was a power surge that allegedly might have been, hit the forest over in Siberia or wherever, and caused a massive energy flux that might have been his, experiment gone bad. They think he was trying to develop an energy weapon. And then of course,
Yeah.
free energy and all that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that was supposedly with his Wardenclyffe
Okay.
experiments. That like one of the last times that he ever fired it up, he like throttled it up past 11, and then supposedly that was the what was it, the Tunguska
Yes, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
fireball
Yeah.
from that. But I have yet to find any confirmation on that. It's a good story, but I've looked and looked and checked all the references, and I have yet to find that there was a connection. I'm not saying that my research is perfect, but the original story, when this came out, there were some flaws in the logic that I found, that I discovered, fairly quickly. That being said, the Wardenclyffe Tower, if Tesla had actually been able to build, because he was going to build a very large coal-fired generator to power this thing, and it may have had that ability
Right.
to do that if it was powered up, full force, and it would have been, because Tesla's death beam, as you were talking about earlier, that was a particle beam weapon. When the Wardenclyffe Tower could have produced, say like an energy beam, or even just like a really powerful electrical bolt that, if aimed properly, would bounce off the upper atmosphere and then come down at a pick location.
Yeah.
The original story was that he was going to try to have a radio communication with a ship that was like a government ship that was doing an expedition to around the North Pole, I think is where it was, and that he was going to fire it up and like send a radio message, but then supposedly it
Overshot.
was a little too powerful. Yeah, and then they, their slide rule, they didn't know how to use a slide rule properly.
Yes. Yes. There's some interesting quotes he made throughout his life. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, which is, that's all quantum mechanics, quantum physics that we're finding more and more and more out today. When we get into the quantum computer and all that stuff, it's all about that frequency, energy, and vibration and spin. So he was ahead of his time, I think, in so many ways in terms of all of that. And he said something that was very interesting to me. He said, the day science begins to study non-physical phenomenon, it will make more progress in one decade than in all previous centuries of its existence, which is fascinating when you think of how much progress we're making on the decade level in today's modern world, and when you're talking about non-physical phenomenon, you get into this weird area of quantum physics and whatnot, where it's about energy, vibration, spin, all that stuff, that it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. And then on top of all that, obviously, free energy. there's been so many people who have allegedly come up with free energy, pulling it from the ether, pulling it out of the air or whatnot. And that's just a really good way to not live that long, apparently. It seems like that's,
Oh yeah.
and then, but one of the fascinating things about this, and maybe you have a little bit more information, here we are today, with Donald John Trump as our president. His uncle, his father's brother, John Trump, was one of the gentlemen with the FBI who was there to seize all the documents and whatnot from Tesla's bedroom at the hotel where he passed away. From what I understand, that's just the simple historical fact of what happened. And to this day, we don't know what was found, what wasn't found, even with FOIA requests and everything else. Go ahead and just unpack that for a second, because that's
Sure.
wild.
Sure. Well, I should point out that John Trump was an engineer at MIT who was specializing in nuclear fusion. Um, uh, I mean, these were just like the very, very rudimentary stages of examining whether or not you could extract energy safely from the splitting of atoms. And Trump had proposed at one point, this is while Tesla was still alive, that you could use Van de Graaff generators in order to generate the power to operate these nuclear generators, fusion devices. And Tesla had then sent his own letter in saying that you would have to have Van de Graaff generators that were about 20 feet high in order to generate even half the amount of electricity needed for these nuclear reactors. And one of his Tesla coils, no taller than 5 feet, would be able to generate all the power that they needed plus. Yeah. And I don't think that left a very good taste in John Trump's mouth. Nobody likes to have, and again, this goes back to Edison, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to have somebody come in and say, "No, your idea is stupid.
Yeah.
Mine is better." And that's the thing about Tesla, though, is that his ideas pretty much always were better, and that's one of the reasons that he was constantly clashing, I think, with other people. Because everybody's always wanting to be the big dog. My idea is the penultimate idea, and Tesla would be like, and they're like, no, but.
Yeah.
And like I said, Tesla generally was always right.
Yeah.
So around the time that Tesla finally passed away, he was living in the New Yorker hotel in New York, and people think that at this point that he was basically destitute, but he wasn't destitute. He was able to live in the New Yorker hotel. He still had benefactors. He was still making some royalties, and I think that the government as well was providing him with money to be able to continue to live like he was used to. Now, before this, he had been kicked out of several other of the big hotels in New York for debt, not being able to make his payments. But by this point, I think that people understood that Tesla needed help, and they were providing it. Plus, he was still doing experiments. The New Yorker actually had provided him with a laboratory on one of the upper floors of this hotel, so him and his assistant could continue their work. He was working right up to the day that he passed away.
What was
right?
he working on then? Do you know?
Nobody really knows. It probably it may have been a continuation of his the wireless generation of electricity, because this was something that could be used on a number of other different things. His last patent was for an airplane. Basically, it was more like a helicopter type of device that would be able to lift off vertically and then fly horizontally. That was his very last patent, and he came up with that when he was living at the New Yorker. So he could have been working on just about anything. And the nice thing about the New Yorker is that the New Yorker had their own internal power supply. If the power in New York was to go out, they would just have to flip a switch, and they had these giant generators in the basement capable of enough electricity to run that entire building and probably the entire block. So I
Wow.
have no doubt that Tesla made use of that generator.
Wow.
Um, but at around this same time, yeah, actually, it had been, like maybe about 10 years earlier. Tesla had announced on his birthday that he had been working on a new weapon. He referred to it as a death beam, and that even though that term really didn't fit. Tesla saw it more as a defensive weapon rather than an offensive weapon. It was something that he said could knock airplanes and missiles and things out, just completely out of the air, hundreds of miles before they even got close to a country's border. And his patent and his writings about it, it's a particle beam weapon. It was the first particle beam weapon ever thought of. And it was his concept that he would use like an electrified, what was it, like an electrified plasma beam, and that you would shoot into it. Um, Gosh, what was it? A tungsten, I think it is. Like ground up tungsten to the point where it's like no bigger than tobacco smoke, that sort of thing. And then you would introduce this into this electrified beam, and it would be like billions of little bullets, electrified bullets, just shooting out all at once. And I mean, you'd tear a plane or a missile apart. It probably wouldn't do people much good either. Um, and he attempted to interest the United States government into it. Nope, we're not interested. And this was around the time that Nazi Germany was starting to start causing some problems in Europe. And so he went to some of our allies, and eventually was able to sell the concept to the Soviet Union through a company that was located here in the United States, whose job it was to broker business deals between American and Russian, or Soviet Union companies. And so through this company, the Soviet Union paid Tesla, I can't remember how much it was, $30,000, something like that, for the patents and blueprints, of this device. And apparently they were happy with what they got, because a year later they gave him more money, you
Wow.
know. And there were letters written back and forth between the engineers in the Soviet Union working on this and Tesla, but we really don't know whatever became of that. I mean, Germany, of course, ended up invading Russia, so probably any of the development that was taking place at the time was abandoned, because everybody had to take up arms to fight the encroaching Nazis. However, years later, in the 1970s, the United States, using one of their early spy cameras, spy satellite cameras, photographed this interesting structure in Kazakhstan, I think is where it was. And it was identified later as a particle beam weapon that the Russians were experimenting on. So more than likely, they held on to these ideas that Tesla had. Brought them up to date, of course. Tesla had died in 1943. So I mean, and this was something that was probably starting to be built in the early 1970s. But again, based on Tesla's original ideas.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating? And listen, I believe this with all my heart. There's no way I can prove it, but I believe with all my heart there was a lot in those documents that came out after he died. I'm not even sure that there was any secrets. There might have been, which is fascinating to go down that thought process too. But I think that there just might have needed time for the stuff to be able to be manufactured, made, understood, packaged and more than likely, put to military use. But I really do believe that there had to have been stuff in there that was it's too Tesla for that to not be the case. That's just me.
The material that the government was able to confiscate after Tesla's death, some of it in his room or rooms there in the New Yorker. He was renting two rooms side by side with then a door open between the two. He had a safe there, not a big safe, but it was big enough that he had some stuff in it. But he also had a floor of a warehouse. I think it was called the Manhattan Warehouse, where a lot of his material was being kept, trunks and bundles, and it varies from information to information on just how much he had there, but it was quite a bit of stuff. And that wasn't the only location, that he had material stashed away. So once the FBI got the Office of Foreign Affairs involved, which was always kind of odd because at that point Tesla had long been an American citizen.
Right.
But the FBI didn't want it to look suspicious that why is the FBI confiscating all of this material? So, they had the Office of Foreign Affairs, do it, just kind of as a cover. John Trump, as you said, from MIT, was the guy who went through this stuff in this warehouse. Everything was collected that they had found and brought to this warehouse. And he spent a day and a half, maybe, not long, going through this material, and then wrote up a letter, to Washington saying that most of the material here is philosophical in nature, with little scientific impact, and that was it, But the majority of it then disappeared into the government warehouses. All right. They were taken from the location at the Manhattan warehouse and basically spread around. All right. So now, if this was material that was of little scientific interest, why did they hold on to it? Why was it spread out? Why was parts of it sent to various other government research laboratories, Air Force bases, other locations throughout the country? Right? Now, the other go ahead.
I mean, I know what I think about that. But
well, okay. Okay, and now keep that in mind. So really, just a few years later, around 1953, 1955, I think is what it was,
Yeah.
the government of Yugoslavia petitioned the United States government for the return of Tesla's material so they could put it into their Nikola Tesla museum that they were building in Belgrade. And the United States government was like, sure, and said that they sent them everything that they had, and they sent a lot, to Belgrade. So if the United States government had been that interested in Tesla's material to the point where they kept it as soon as they got a hold of it, even though they said it wasn't worth anything, why did they then so easily give it up to a communist nation at the time?
Well,
If this was important material, was it just stupidity?
no, no, I'm sure
Had
that,
they, yeah, had they already made, copies of everything that they
yeah,
needed, you know,
yeah.
and because um, there's a lot of material of Tesla's in the Belgrade Museum that Westerners have never been allowed to see.
Wow.
Including now there was a television crew for a show called the Tesla Files that was able to get they weren't able to get close-ups, but the museum curator put these out on a table for them to look at, and a couple of these were um, his drawings of Wardenclyffe that have never been seen before, and also his death beam. All right, which definitely, as far as anybody knows, has never been seen. So there's only like wide shots, kind of at an angle, but we know that that museum has these things.
Where did they get them
So
from?
the United States, the
Allegedly,
United
right? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The United States government, was the one who had all of this stuff and then handed them over to Yugoslavia. So again, did they already have copies and just didn't care anymore? Or just at this point had forgotten why Tesla was important and just like, yeah, why do we have this stuff? I just go ahead and send it. Yeah, I mean, the with government bureaucracy, a lot of times, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and and this it would have been 1944 when he died in 43, and by 1944 everything had been taken away and disappeared into the government archives. So 10 years time then, had they forgotten about it? I don't know. It's a mystery, to me.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, we might not ever know, but you'd have a hard time changing my mind about the fact that there was probably stuff in there that was taken. And, just like spycraft and everything else, it's so like what we know is a lot of times it's put out there. So we think we know, but what we know is not the truth, and I mean, it could be as simple as, they found amazing stuff and all the other stuff. They said, no, but I don't know. But at the end of the day, if Tesla touched it, I have a feeling it was real, and I think it matters. And I think if there was any ability for, especially the military, to utilize it, they would have done that, and they wouldn't have shared it. That's my opinion. But oh well.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree.
And it,
I agree.
and it is funny. I mean, the military, how patents. A lot of people don't realize this, but like if you invent something and the military likes it, it's pretty. You're not going to be holding on to your patent, So
Right.
it's very interesting how that all works out and whatnot. And Tesla too. He was with this free energy stuff and whatnot. He was looking at the pyramids, and then you get this recent news about these structures under the pyramids. You just wonder if it's all connected in some way. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, and I mean, if it had anything to do with, like you said, with electricity, energy, vibrations, Tesla was in on it. And I mean, he had some later on in his life some rather, esoteric ideas when it came to how he thought maybe the universe, operated. And I will have to add also that even though a lot of his ideas kind of sound like our some of our current understandings of quantum mechanics, Tesla had no room for quantum mechanics. He didn't even like Einstein's theories of the atom and things like that. Tesla thought things work completely differently. But I think it's kind of a situation where all of these different physicists and Tesla, they kind of tunnel vision towards their interests and not wanting to include that the universe is a big place and there are a lot of different forces at work.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll know it in a matter of months now that we've got the Willow chip, the quantum computing chip, and everything else.
That's right.
uh, Boy, you want to get into a whole other situation there with that. It's wild.
Mhm.
Man, I appreciate you coming on and kind of unpacking some of the stuff. It's fun to talk about Tesla because he is not history kind of passed him by a little bit. And I think that there was a resurgence through probably the scientific community that was like, this is actually Tesla, that we weren't taught in school. But as the 20th century moved into the 21st and some of the things start coming out, you realize that he was in it. He was in it. And a brilliant mind and an enigma and just one of those things in history that I would love if I could meet. There's a number of people I'd love to meet if I could just go back in time. I'd love to hang out with that dude for just one afternoon. Hey, I'll be your assistant today. You know, just I think that would be brilliant. You know,
Yep, it would be. It would be that it would be a thrill to actually meet and have a conversation with Tesla if he found the time.
right?
He was always a busy man.
Yeah. The saddest thing about Tesla is in his heyday, man, just handsome fella.
Mhm.
He had a very, there's a twinkle in his eye. But you see the pictures of him right before he passed away. He was just so gaunt and, and man, it just kind of sad to see.
Mm. Well, I mean, he had heart problems, and then, what was it, like 4 years before he did die, he was hit by a taxi cab.
I didn't know
And,
that.
oh yeah, yeah. And, I think that was the injury that really sent him on his spiral downwards, because I don't think he ever really completely recovered, from that accident.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And he was a big walker too. Like I said, he liked to walk like 8 to 10 miles a day. So
Yep,
that
yep,
might
yep.
have
Well,
got
he liked to walk to the nearby park so he could feed the pigeons.
all the pigeon thing is fascinating too, right? Didn't he
Yep.
have
Oh,
one
he
that was
loved.
like a soulmate or something?
Oh, that's what he said. But I mean, he just thought that pigeons were just magnificent animals. Yeah.
Well,
So
what's funny about that is pigeons, messenger pigeons, carrier pigeons.
that's right.
They use, is it magnetic frequencies or magnetic? They can read the magnetism, or is it electromagnetic? That might be where the fascination was too. You just never know.
Yep.
It's yeah, brilliant, man. Tim, I appreciate you. You got anything out there right now that you need people to absolutely go check out? I know all your books are on Amazon. Tim R. Schwartz, and what else is there? Anything?
Well, yeah, we're working on a new book right now as we're talking that I'm hoping to have finished and published by this summer.
Okay.
Our usual band of great writers like Sean Castile and Scott Corrales and Nigel Watson are all contributing to this new book. But right now, uh, our latest book is called Weird Time: Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space. And it's available on Amazon both as a print and an ebook. And I tell you something, that's all my books are my favorites, but right now this one is really my favorite because I think that everybody who contributed to this book, I mean, just top notch. I mean, we go into, and we pull a little Nikola Tesla in as well, on this book. But I mean, we go into the most recent ideas that physicists have on the nature of time, and then go off onto all the weird tangents that we all know and love. We even have a chapter about pop culture and time machines, the movies and television shows about time travel. So, there's something for everyone in that book.
Yeah. Scott, Marty. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
right.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, listen, man, whenever your book comes out, maybe we'll have you back on and get it out there and talk about it. And man, I appreciate you. It's always fun to come back and talk to someone again the second time around where it's like you get to know them a little bit better. And as soon as I found out, it's funny, last time we were talking, as soon as I found out that you had written a book about Tesla, I was like, Homer Simpson. I was like, oh, because I'm a big fan. So I appreciate you coming back on. Thank you so much, Tim.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm glad we had a chance to talk about Tesla because Tesla is one of my favorite subjects as well. And I should mention that sometime in May, I don't have the exact date yet, but there's a show on the History Channel called History's Greatest Mysteries that you'll see me on, and we'll be talking about Tesla.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll be like, I know him. Yeah,
That's
I'll
right.
make sure. Yeah. Sometime in May. And what was the name of it again?
History's Greatest Mysteries. It airs Monday nights on the History Channel.
I'll catch it. Awesome, man. So talking about Tesla, I'll watch it anyway. So hey, appreciate you, brother. Be amazing. And we'll catch you again. Awesome.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. The one and only Tim R. Swartz. Thank you, sir. Wow, what a ride. I want to give a huge thanks to Tim R. Swartz for coming back on the show and bringing the fire once again. His insights on Tesla, the man, the myth, the mystery are absolutely invaluable. If this episode opened your eyes, confirmed what you suspected, or just gave you that gut feeling that there's more to the story, then here's how you help keep this mission alive. Smash that like button, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you're subscribed because the Ryan Files is just getting warmed up. If you want early access to new episodes and exclusive bonus content, consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube, or go even deeper by joining us at Patreon at patreon.com/Orion Files, where our supporters are known as agents of the Ryan Files. Don't miss out. There's a reason why we have over 600 new subscribers just this past week alone. Join our community. Become an agent of the Ryan Files. We can't wait to have you. Big love to all of you out there who are standing for truth and helping shine a light where others fear to look. You folks are awesome. Be amazing, be positive, and stay curious out there, my friends. And I'll see you right here next time on The Ryan Files.
Are you not curious?
Preparing to transfer the Ryan files. Now.
I present to you, with great intrigue and wonder, the Ryan